We're
All
live.
right, folks, welcome to this week's episode of The Left, the Right, and the Absurd. Tonight, as per a user request as of last week, we are going to be discussing mutualism. For those that don't know, it is like the coolest shit ever. And if you're not one, you're not cool.
Yeah, you're a dork.
Ah, dork.
You're a dweeb.
You should be pushed into a locker.
But yeah, no. Tonight, basically, it's going to be two of us discussing mutualism, and then the other three are just going to sit here and try and shit on us, and then we're just going to like blow their minds.
With our
I
massive.
believe the user was Lucky Lemon, and he said, "Do you guys think you could possibly discuss mutualism?"
Yeah.
So
well,
we thank you for the recommendation.
Shout out to you, Lucky Lemon.
Thank you for being our lucky lemon and handing us lemons, because life needed to hand us lemons, and now we have mutualism.
do you think he owns Lemon Party?
All right, so
Moving on.
today, we want to give you a brief intro into what mutualism is before we go on and like blow your minds. And I know I already said it's awesome, but that's not exactly what it is.
I don't know where to start on because
Well, you want to start with Proudhon?
yeah, I mean I could start with Proudhon.
To give you guys a brief introduction to what it is, though, without going into the different styles of mutualism, it is a form of market anarchism that is left-leaning, socialist, while remaining individualist, utilizing competition to drive the market while still basing everything on workers owning shit.
Yeah. And what's funny is that Proudhon's original "What is Property" was more in the form of like a leaflet that he was handing to like a college or something that he was a part of, and it was more addressed to like professors and things. And his whole critique with property was based on like Roman law that was present in most of 1840 France, and of course it's been updated since then.
I'd actually like to read a quick something here from Proudhon. It's a nice little quote. In abolishing rent and interest, the last vestiges of old-time slavery, the revolution abolishes at one stroke the sword of the executioner, the seal of the magistrate, the club of the policeman, the gauge of the exciseman, the erasing knife of the department clerk, all those insignias of politics which young liberty grinds beneath her heel.
Yeah, I mean I could just tell you a little bit about Proudhon, but depends on where.
Proudhon also had a huge influence on Marx as well.
Yeah, Proudhon had a huge, like his entire "What is Property" uh, influenced Marx a lot, and later things Marx critiqued him, and their friendship kind of went sour.
That
Yeah.
seemed to happen a lot with Marx.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just because he smelled bad.
Maybe it was because he was a douche.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe
I
he
mean,
was just a smelly douche.
It's because he was a German Jew.
funny.
Fucking Jews ruining everything. Anyway.
No, but another thing is that Proudhon was inspired by what's his fucking name? Can't remember his name, but who wrote a critique?
Ricardo, maybe?
It was another person.
I think Ricardo was around the same time as Proudhon, actually.
I can't remember the guy's name, but
Godwin.
Proudhon was technically the quote-unquote grandfather or father of anarchism. whatever it would
Godwin.
be. Yeah, Godwin. And it's also funny because Proudhon was a member of the French Parliament. And he did believe that he could change the system from the inside, which obviously didn't work.
But I guess enough about the man. What about his
His
theories and the impressions they left on the world, and the other individuals that he inspired.
yeah. When it comes to his theories, uh, I would have to. I guess when it comes to like his philosophy, I don't know what specific, if we're gonna call them materials or not, but he does have a quote that's really long on government. So if you want to wait that long, it says, "To be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censored, commanded by creatures who have neither the right nor the wisdom nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is under pretext of public utility and in the name of the general interest to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, squeezed, hoaxed, robbed. Then, at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint to be repressed, fined, vilified, harassed, hunted down, abused, clubbed, disarmed, bound, choked, imprisoned. Judge, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, into crownal, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality."
Well, we can see uh, the anarchist in him there.
Yeah,
Just a little bit.
and another interesting thing is that he became more free market esque in later books, but in his original What is Property, it was mostly critique of capitalist economics and property rights. And he does say the following, and he sees no contradiction in these terms, and neither do I. He has said property is theft, property is impossible, uh, property is freedom. When he was referring to theft, he's referring to the landowner who believed stole the profits from laborers, from the workers, essentially. So that was what would make the property, in a sense, theft. It would be considered liberty when it's or property is freedom when the product of an individual's labor is not, in quote, stolen. Where
Now, for the purpose of this discussion, I think we should define what mutualism is in at least the most general terms, and then we can get into more specific branches of different types of mutualists.
Can I
Yeah.
pull a quote straight from mutualist.org?
go
Sure.
wait, yeah, it's from Kevin Carson. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it is called, they define mutualism as a social system based on equal freedom, reciprocity, and the sovereignty of the individual over himself, his affairs, his products, realized through the individual initiative, free contract, cooperation, competition, and voluntary association for defense against invasive and for the protection of life, liberty, and property and of the non-invasive.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of important when mutualists talk about property, because they're not talking about in the same sense that how capitalists would refer to property. Uh,
Right.
so I don't know directly how to explain it at the moment, but if you want to like doing it to define,
Well, I think the difference for like between capitalism and other forms of anarchism is how they define property. And in capitalism, like it's private ownership of the means of production, and there's private property, whereas in others there's not. It's socialized ownership of the means of production, and private property is diminished or completely abolished. So I think that's a complete.
and the thing that a lot of people critique from mutuals is that they are depending on the mutuals. They do believe at certain points it is okay to be employed by another.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I mean mostly mutuals agree that cooperatives and things like that are the way to go,
Yeah.
but they're not directly against working for a wage or working for the wage of another. So, but they believe it has to have certain factors present, where it would actually be mutually beneficial, where there is no quote-unquote exploitation from one to the other, where they would get the full amount of what they put in.
There's criteria to validate it.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, your definition was good, but like for an economic standpoint, an economic definition of mutualism, what would that be?
I think in the most basic terms, from my knowledge, is that it's collectivized means of production, but privatized, or like it has like elements of a free
retains
market.
A market, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
I
hope that answered your question. I don't.
I mean,
know
I
what
was
you're getting
asking
at.
everyone in the chat, but yeah.
Yeah. I think from it depends because I would say mutualism is kind of a complicated thing because there are so many variations from theorists. But mostly is that they do believe in like cooperatives where each person can like work together in like a collective sense and can also work in a private sense.
Should we bring up the Mondragon Corporation?
Yeah, I can actually pull that up.
I was just going to ask for like examples of mutualism in action, so that'd be great.
Well, it's a cooperative. It's a corporation that is a cooperative. Cooperatives.
Okay.
But I mean, I can read right off this essay if you want.
Is it your essay?
No, it's
Umbreon's.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well then, he's going to be mentioned in this episode. Good for him.
Yeah. It says it was founded in 1956 in the town of Mondragon, in the Basque region of Spain, by a priest named Jose Maria. I'm not going to try to attempt saying that last name. It says today it's the 10th largest company in Spain and employs 74,000 workers around the world. And as said, it's a federation of cooperatives. And let me go down.
Basically, cooperatives are a big part of it. While owning your own company is possible, you utilize your own labor at the same time to work that company.
I've also heard mutualism as defined by each individual owning their own individual means of production. But I am sure that's just
it's
small
not
fraction
wrong,
of.
but like, I mean, I don't know how to go about that, but I mean, it could where the means of production can each either be owned individually or collectively. So
Okay.
There's no set in stone way, I guess, is the best way to put it. There's,
they
like
just
I said, possible individually owned companies, but those companies would be ran by the owner. Everything would be done by them. While the collective companies would be a collectively owned means of production, similar to any other form of socialism.
And these different types of organization compete.
Yes.
but I think we probably should mention the difference between a capitalist free market and a mutualist free market, if you want to tackle that. I think because it is important how mutuals define a market in like a free market sense. I mean, it's not very different from a capitalist, but they want certain factors that can lead to monopolization. Like they want rent, interests, and profit taken out, so that labor cannot be exploited, and still put in a competitive market environment.
So essentially, just discussing the four monopolies.
Yeah, if you want to actually jump into that.
I'm trying to find it once again,
Well,
but I know the first two are land and money. at least the Tuckerite
Yeah,
mutualism.
I
Those,
can briefly read over the monopolies if you want me to.
Before that, real quick, you mentioned the difference between free markets and capitalism and free markets and mutualism. But what
Yeah.
about things like free market socialism? Is that the same thing, or are there differences as
Well,
well?
I mean, there are different variations between different forms of market socialism,
Okay.
like free market socialism, depending on certain factors, of course. Like, I know there's economic democracy and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Market socialism has a state, does it not?
Well, again, mutualism would just be considered anarchist market socialism,
Okay.
Okay.
but it does depend on the if it requires one or not.
I
It's
mean,
both-
I was gonna bring up Yugoslavia under Tito.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember his name right now, but he said that the issue with Yugoslavia was not the issue of socialism itself. It was, fuck, can't remember it right now, but it wasn't the issue of like socialism and market socialism being a failure. There was just certain things present that prevented it from being put out properly. Like, fuck, I don't have to find it.
All right, so where do we go from there?
well, the important part in differentiating between the mutualist free market and the capitalist free market is the four monopolies. The four monopolies were the land monopoly, the money monopoly, the patent monopoly, and there was one last one for the life of me. Why?
Tariffs.
I was gonna say profit, but I don't believe that's
There's
it.
the money monopoly, the land monopoly, tariffs, and patents.
Okay, yeah. To get an understanding, the land monopoly, this is according to Proudhon here, and what is property? Contrasted property based on proper or individual possession in modern property in which an absentee owner of property asserts the right to use it by his neighbor's labor. Essentially, the land monopoly being, in a capitalist sense, the ability to profit while being an absentee, while in a through mutualist land ownership, you would either be required to be part of the cooperative and be present, or owning your own personal company and utilizing all profit would be individually going to you due to the fact that you are the individual working this.
That
Hey,
reminds
to
me
use the
of
example,
occupancy and use, which is, I know, a similar anarcho-syndicalism.
Yeah.
I don't know if Adam
there's
can comment on that.
we're
It
going to be
sounds like
talking about
occupancy and use, basically.
use a little bit. I do have a section bookmarked in one of Benjamin Tucker's books on that. But to use the farm as an example, in a capitalist farm, there would be the man that owns the land and then the people working the farm for him, making the profit. The landowner has no necessity to actually work the field with his workers. While there's the possibility that he may, it's not a necessity. In using the mutualist model, there's a necessity for that man to either work with the other field workers or work his own field in order to reap profit from it.
I have a question. So, what would prevent a landowner in that situation? Like, what would prevent somebody from becoming a landowner? I guess is what I'm saying. Like, what would prevent that guy from paying people to work his land instead of him working alongside them or just owning his own land.
Do you mean like be building like a land monopoly?
Yeah.
I guess because I mean there are like social norms.
Hmm.
As soon as like it becomes like a societal norm, it wouldn't kind of make sense, I would say,
Right.
but that isn't really a good argument. But
It's a similar argument to the capitalist argument as well. The argument of competition, well, utilizing the market. If this man refuses to pay, then the workers will say, well, I can start my own farm, or we can all take our portion and do that. There's also the jury system, which we will be getting into later. I have a portion of that actually discusses, well, actually it might be a decent thing to bring up here. This is going to be a little bit of a wordy thing, so I'm sorry in advance.
After you read this, though, do a quick explanation like you did before. I think that helps.
And the terror of rigidity is equally groundless. This rule of 10-acre possession or any similar one that may be adopted is no more rigid crystalline custom than this is Mr. Herbert's own rule of protecting titles transferred by purchase and sale. Any rule is rigid less by the rigidity of its terms than by the rigidity of its enforcement. Now it is precisely in the tempering of the rigidity of enforcement that one of the chief excellences of anarchism consists. Mr. Herbert must remember that under anarchism all rules and laws will be little more than suggestions for the guidance of juries, and that all disputes, whether about land or anything else, will be submitted to juries which will judge not only the facts, but the law, the justice of the law, its applicability to the given circumstances, and the penalty or damage to be inflicted because of its infraction. What better safeguard against rigidity could there be than this? Machinery for altering the law, indeed. Why, under anarchism, the law will be so flexible that it will shape itself to every emergency and need no alteration, and it will then be regarded as just a proportion to its flexibility instead of as now in proportion to its rigidity. So essentially, the whole concept that it's trying to, while laws will exist, as Adam stated, they wouldn't be considered more so laws but societal norms, and these juries will reflect upon these societal norms and apply them to these circumstances. These will allow flexibility regarding individual circumstances.
Seems more like a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, what he was saying was that it would essentially, the laws would write themselves and the societal norms would fall in place as the transition got further and further.
And do you accept that will happen? Or do you think that that's kind of utopian?
I think much like anyone that supports anarchism will understand that this isn't going to be an overnight thing. As we can see with things like the Mondragon Corporation, that while difficult, it is possible for things like this to occur. And the whole mutualist model is based off, a lot of the mutualist model is actually based off small-scale transition from...
That's actually something I wanted to mention. I think a major reason that most mutualists don't actually support revolution, which is, I think that this is from what my understanding is that because there still is going to be remnants of what would be considered capital society, and there would be still these norms in place that could revert it back, so that like Josiah Warren set up a few places that reflected mutualist economics and that were working. That's why they want to do more experiment type things with stores and towns that reflect mutualist economics to show that there is an alternative. to make it more of like a norm, and then they can worry about the economic thing. Then they can slowly take down the state.
For a great example, though it did fail, it was due to Owen, the establishment of the Owenite colony. It was a small-scale group that attempted to essentially establish their own colony. It did fail for many reasons, namely Owen's lack of presence to assist them, as most of them didn't understand what most of the people that participated, Josiah Warren being one of them.
Are we talking about like harmony?
Yeah.
I know Marx and Engels both. Basically, in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, Engels mentions Owen and the Owenites, as well as Saint Simon and the other utopian socialists. And you could probably chop that up as it being just that, a utopian ideal. But as mutualism further progressed, even to the point where it is today, it's no longer just a utopian idea. It actually has some merit to it.
And
I mean, technically, harmony wasn't really a mutualist. It was more communistic. It was technically a communist colony. But he went back and tried making like new harmony, which technically in more a sense it was a kind of a failure, but it was more based on Warren's vision. But he also did do the Cincinnati Times story, which actually started out quite rough, but actually turned out to be somewhat of a success. Which was based off the libertarian value.
But essentially what we are trying to say is that, take the group of us here, for example. We could all go out and essentially buy a plot of land and start a cooperative. Through our success, we could grow this, and people would want to join in. And that, while slow growth, would be the workings of granted, were we all mutualists here, would be the beginnings of establishing a mutualist cooperative. That is one of the things that a lot of mutualists support, is this small-scale movement towards a greater goal.
Yeah.
So we hit. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is that how Marxism has dialectical materialism as its core philosophy? Does mutualism have any philosophical backing, or is it purely economic?
Technically, I would say the philosophical backing would be anarchism.
All right.
Mutualism as its own thing technically is more of an economic theory than anything else.
But I mean, I guess, like you said before, mutualism sort of implies anarchism.
Yeah, I mean, it is an anarchist school of thought, but it's also an economic theory. I wouldn't say it is. Mutualism has its own philosophy to it.
But we also have to look at the fact that mutualism is mainly a economic form, whereas Marxism is actually a philosophical concept in and of itself.
Yeah.
Marxism being a transition from socialism into communism.
Because I've met all kinds of mutualists, because again, mutualism is compatible with a lot of different philosophies, just an economic system. But I would say with Tuckerite egoism, that's something that I've noticed that a lot of mutualists actually lean towards, is Tuckerite egoism. So
I think, and I've always been a fairly large supporter of this. I think the Stirnerian thought of the Union of Egoists actually ties in extremely well with the concept of mutualism in the sense that you could essentially establish a form of mutualism in the Union of Egoists. Essentially, the union would be a union of mutualists establishing a small-scale group to show its success until it grows further and further, creating a much larger version of the Union of Egoists.
Real quick, for any listeners that are interested in mutualism, do Cole and Adam want to give out some popular mutualist writers and then some of the most essential works you'd want to read?
I can give out specific authors. I know some books that I can recommend. The one that I do have is actually kind of expensive, not really, but I think it's worth it. I actually have on my desk right here is the Property is Theft, Pierre Joseph Proudhon anthology. It's over 800 pages. It has most of Proudhon's works in it. It has notes and letters. It has all of his essential works in it. And if you want to buy it, you can either go to Amazon and look that up, or go to AK Press. Just Google AK Press. It's an anarchist book publisher. They have all kinds of stuff.
You could possibly link them in the description.
Yeah, we'll do that later. I'll link it. And another probably one is that I can recommend is Benjamin Tucker and his works. Josiah Warren, he has a few ones that I would think are essential.
I actually have in front of me Benjamin Tucker's book, which I think is extremely important, as it's primarily excerpts from Benjamin Tucker's newspaper called Liberty.
Yeah.
And the book is called Instead of a Book. It's got an extremely long title, actually. It's Instead of a Book by Man Too Busy to Write One, a fragmentary exposition of philosophical anarchism. And Tucker was taught by Josiah Warren, but he also knew a lot of Proudhon's work. So he takes from both of them, which I think is extremely important. Also, we can link mutualism.org. It's one of the best.
Yeah, that's actually run by Kevin Carson.
It's mutualist.org, because I tried to look it up before the show, and I typed in mutualism.org, and it took me to a different site. So, mutualist.org.
Mutualist.org is run by Kevin Carson. He's another contemporary mutualist. I do recommend him. He's more leaning towards the individualist side of mutualism. So he's more influenced by people like Tucker.
Would you just throw in Stirner's Ego in its own?
I would throw it in as more, because again, this is just my opinion. I would throw in people like Nietzsche and Stirner, because those were also influences to Benjamin Tucker.
Well, Nietzsche was a
strict individualist.
He was a successor of Stirner.
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with it as well.
I would just throw in because that does get more of like a philosophical back into like some of Tucker's beliefs. But I would, if we're like contemporary mutualists, that I could recommend is probably be Kevin Carson and Sean P. Wilbur. They both have their own websites. Sean P. Wilbur actually has like 3 different websites. You'll find it. I've actually found his Facebook page, so.
Yeah, we can link all that in the description. So we hit the first monopoly, which was land. Can we go on to the second, which would be money?
Hold on, Megan.
That sounds like a good idea. Go over the food.
Another person mentioned would be William B. Green. He did something on mutual. He actually did 3 books or 2 on mutual banking. So.
That would be best discussed through the competition of banking, would it not?
Yeah. So you wanted to discuss money?
Yeah, sure.
Money, the money monopoly.
A mutualist.org, just to see what this is. This is what they class. This is an excerpt from them as to what the money monopoly entails, and it says the credit monopoly by which the state controls who can and cannot loan money reduces the ability of working class people to create their own alternatives to capitalism by charging high amounts of interest on loans, which is possibly only because competition is restricted. Few people can afford to create cooperatives or one-person firms. In addition to having to repay loans at high interest to capitalist banks, ensures that cooperatives often have to undermine their own principles by having to employ wage labor to make ends meet. So the credit monopoly, by artificially restricting the option to work for ourselves, ensures we work for a boss.
Yeah.
Essentially, the whole goal of abolishing the money monopoly, as Tucker and Proudhon discussed, was competitive banking. Competitive banking being the establishment of different banks in an attempt to drop the interest rate to such a low point that the only interest that the bank makes off it is the profit of their own labor as well.
Yeah.
And this goal would be to allow people to take loans from the bank, and once their cooperative is established or once their personal firm is established, the ability to repay that with, as it said, collapse on their principles and employ alternative forms of labor.
Yeah.
Well, I actually like completely agree with the first part of that, as the state like restricting competition and not allowing people to get loans to start their own firms, because I know if you try to set up a business as like a sole proprietorship or something like that, that it's incredibly difficult to get loans, and so to have the capital necessary to run your own business by yourself and not employ other people in a state environment is pretty darn hard. So I would agree with that.
The site is mutualist.org, free market anti-capitalism.
Yeah.
I found it. Okay, I'm going to link it right now.
Yeah. Again, like another person.
Carry on.
Sean P. Wilder. He has his, like, fuck me if I can actually pronounce it, but like Contramin or something like that. He would be a more Proudhonian-leaning mutualist. I don't know when's the last time he actually updated it, but he does have a lot of things revolving around like critiques. And I know he did something. He responds to people who ask him questions on his website. So if you actually want to ask him something, just comment and he'll most likely answer it. And he's
here is an excerpt from Tucker as well on banking. For say Proudhon and Warren, if the business of banking were made free to all, and more persons would enter into it until the competition should become sharp enough to reduce the price of lending money to the labor cost, which statistics show to be less than 3/4%. In that case, the thousands of people who are now deterred from going into business by ruinously high rates, which they must pay for capital with which to start and carry on business, will find their difficulties removed. So the whole concept that I was talking about earlier was the idea that what Tucker was trying to say was that taking banks and establishing this competition of more and more people going into banking would drop the interest rate on loans to, as he said, 3/4%. So the interest rate would be 0.75%, which would be minimal. So that 0.75% would be what they consider the labor cost of issuing a loan.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else to mention.
Well, I know from a capitalist perspective, one of the, I guess, a critique of mutualist banking would be that the reason interest rates are higher, like whenever they're giving out loans or whatever, is to ensure that the loan is repaid. And they would probably say that lowering the interest rate by having so many people be in the banking business would not be good, because it kind of like defeats the purpose of having higher interest rates. It's like for them, it's more so to ensure that they don't give a bad loan out, and that people don't take a shitty loan, so that they don't
the concept is it deters people in general from even attempting to take go out for a loan.
Right.
As it basically says, if you don't pay us back, and you probably won't be able to due to our current success and failure rate of business, we're going to take everything you have.
Right.
Well, that doesn't say apply to the ANCAP model in a sense. It applies more so to the current status model that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Criticism, I guess, I don't know if it's criticism, but I'll mention it, is that it seems like mutualism is an individualist solution and not a solution to the problems of capitalism as a whole, because, to a Marxist, capital rules over even capitalists. So just getting rid of individual capitalists while keeping competition doesn't get to the heart of the problem.
I can understand, but I don't know how to actually go about this. But a lot of mutualists believe that the issues that make capitalism such an issue is the things that are actually in place with capitalism. That the market itself is not flawed, and it's not I don't want to say inherently, but it's the certain factors that capitalism has presence that makes it the way it is, makes it exploitative. Again, it comes to interest and profit and rent and things like that, and the property norms.
Right.
And it's saying if those things were taken out, that the market would be, I guess, in a sense, more fair, less exploitation would take place, and that the labor would have
a true free market.
Yes, in a sense, a true free market. And I actually wanted to get into something when it comes to true free markets in a sec, but where was I going? When it comes, fuck.
Did you lose it?
Yeah, but I'm trying. I guess in a true free market, it was saying that if we take these certain things out, that the market would again be free, and it wouldn't be exploitation wouldn't take place, and it would be fair, and that the labor could get the full, I guess, product of his labor and all that, in a sense. And I was actually going to go into protectionism and why mutualists oppose it, because this actually goes into another monopoly. Tucker had actually critiqued protectionism because it caused high prices and prevented producers from competing with foreign competitors. Preventing national from having to compete with foreign competitors. Just let me. I'm going to quote this. It says Tucker opposed protectionism, believing that tariffs cause high prices by preventing national producers from having to compete with foreign competitors. He believed that free trade would help keep prices low and therefore would assist laborers in receiving their, in quotes, natural wage. So that's why most, I guess, in a sense, that's why mutuals oppose protectionism, and in a sense, it kind of does hurt the workers. So,
what is a mutualist critique of full socialism?
what do you mean?
What do you mean by full socialism?
Are you referring to a book, or?
No, I mean like
State socialism.
abolition of a market
Oh,
and private property.
I would have to actually go to.
If it's too
Are
much
we,
of a hassle, then I understand.
No.
are we talking about maintaining the existence of a state, or essentially, would you be talking about Marx's idea of socialism?
Yes.
Because Benjamin Tucker did.
Tucker's got you covered here.
Yeah, state socialism and anarchism, how far they agree and wherein they differ. I could probably just go to the end of it. He says this. It's kind of long,
We've
but
had already a bunch of long quotes. Let's do it.
yeah, it's not the thing itself isn't that long.
I have a portion of the same area, state socialism and anarchism as well. So
yeah, there are two socialisms. One is communistic, the other is solidaritarian. One is dictatorial. Fuck. Don't know how to say that word. The other libertarian. Yeah, that word. The other libertarian. One is metaphysical, the other positive. One is dogmatic, the other scientific. One is emotional, the other reflective. One is destructive, the other constructive. Both are in pursuit of the greatest possible welfare for all. One aims to establish happiness for all, the other to enable each to be happy in his own way. The first regards the state as a society, say generis, of any special essence, the product of a sort of divine right outside of and above all society, with special rights and able to exact special obediences. The second considers the second considers the state as an association like any other, generally managed worse than others. The first proclaims the sovereignty of the state, the second recognizes no sort of sovereign. One wishes all monopolies to be held by the state, the other wishes the abolition of all monopolies. One wishes the governed class to become the governing class, the other wishes the disappearance of classes. Both declare that the existing state of things cannot last. The first considers revolutions as the indispensable agent of evolutions. The second teaches that repression alone turns evolutions into revolution. The first has faith in a cataclysm. The second knows that a social progress will result from the free play of individual efforts. Both understand that we are entering upon a new historic phase. One wishes that there should be none but proletariats. The other wishes that there should be no more proletariats. The first wishes to take everything away from everybody. The second wishes to leave each in possession of its own. The one wishes to expropriate everybody. The other wishes everybody to be a proprietor. The first says, do as the government wishes. The second says, do as you wish yourself. The former threatens with despotism. The latter promises liberty. The former makes the citizen the subject of the state. The latter makes the state the employee of the citizen. One proclaims that labor pains will be necessary to the birth of a new world. The other declares that real progress will not cause suffering to anyone. The first has confidence in social war. The other believes only in the works of peace. One aspires to command, to regulate, to legislate. The other wishes to attain the minimum of command, of regulation, of legislation. One would be followed by the most atrocious of reactions. The other opens unlimited horizons to progress. The first will fail, the other will succeed. Both desire equality. One by lowering heads that are too high, the other by raising heads that are too low. One sees equality under a common yoke, the other will secure equality and complete liberty. One is intolerant, the other tolerant. One frightens, the other reassures. The first wishes to instruct everybody. The second wishes to enable everybody to instruct himself. The first wishes to support everybody. The second wishes to enable everybody to support himself. One says the land to the state, the mind to the state, the tool to the state, the product to the state. The other says the land to the cultivator, the mind to the miner, the tool to the laborer, product to the producer. There are only these two socialisms. One is the infancy of socialism, the other is its manhood. One is already the past, the other is the future. One will give place to the other.
Should I go on with mine?
Well,
that really
I
quick?
just have one very short thing to say, and is that all a Marxist views the state as is a tool of class rule.
Yeah.
I don't think
I mean,
agree
I'm not gonna
with
say
any of those things.
yeah, I'm not gonna say I agree with 100% of that, but I guess I somewhat understand. Like, I do understand what he's trying to say. Uh,
I mean,
whether
I
whether
think
he
this.
has a 100% like complete solid understanding of Marxism, I can't say, but I I do know what he is trying to say. That
I think this portion here will help for those that want to understand what he was trying to say a little bit more, though. Because this is where he really gets into what he's discussing with Marxism.
is this a long quote?
Oh yeah, it's just as long.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Here, before you
Strap
read it,
in.
I think like we should it's almost been an hour, so we could probably end it here and then like discuss the other two monopolies next week and just split it up. That way, it's not so like just information overload. If you guys want to do that.
Yeah, this one just regards to this question, so we'll do this really quickly, if that's
All right.
cool. It was at this point the necessity of striking down monopoly that came the parting of their ways. Here the road forked. They found they must turn either to the right or to the left, follow either the path of authority or the path of liberty. Marx went one way, Warren and Proudhon the other. Thus were born state socialism and anarchism. First, then, state socialism, which may be described as the doctrine that all the affairs of men should be managed by the government regardless of individual choice. Marx, its founder, concluded that the only way to abolish the class monopolies was to centralize and consolidate all industrial and commercial interests, all productive and distributive agencies in one vast monopoly in the hands of the state. The government must become banker, manufacturer, farmer, carrier, and merchant, and in these capacities must offer no competition. Land, tools, and all instruments of production must be wrested from the individual hands and made the property of the collectivity. To the individual can belong only the products to be consumed, not the means of producing them. A man may own his clothes and his food, but not the sewing machine which makes his shirt, or the spade which digs his potatoes. Product and capital are essentially different things. The former belongs to individuals, the latter to society. Society must seize the capital which belongs to it, by the ballot if it can, by revolution if it must. Once in possession of it, it must administer it on the majority principle through its organ, the state, utilize it in production and distribution, fix all prices by the amount of labor involved, and employ the whole people in its workshops, farms, stores, etc. The nation must be transformed into a vast bureaucracy, and every individual into a state official. Everything must be done on the cost principle, the people having no motive to make a profit out of themselves. Individuals not being allowed to own capital, no one can employ another or even himself. Every man will be a wage receiver, the state the only wage payer. He who will not work for the state must starve, or more likely go to prison. All freedom of trade must disappear. Competition must be utterly wiped out. All industrial and commercial activity must be centered in one vast, enormous, all-inclusive monopoly. The remedy for monopolies is monopoly. Such is the economic program of state socialism as adopted from Karl Marx. The history of its growth and progress cannot be told here. In this country, the parties that uphold it are known as the Socialistic Labor Party, which pretends to follow Karl Marx. Yeah.
Well, I'll say I completely disagree with that, but I think we can probably touch on that next week,
yeah.
if that's good with you.
That's fine.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much for watching. We are sorry about all the extremely long quotes that we read tonight.
Yeah.
But
I do think it is
Lucky Lemon, we hope you got what you wanted from this first part, and we look forward to bringing you the second part next week.
And, I mean, if you want to come on, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Hit us up, man. Just don't just don't show us the lemon party. That'd be great.
Yep. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. And then if you want to be on, let us know, and we will do our best to get you on. Thanks for watching.